All right, let's talk domestic commodities. The Central Bank of Nigeria on Monday discontinued the processing of Form M for importation of corn into the country. The Apex Bank directed all authorized dealers to submit the list of Form M already registered for the importation of corn using a designated format on or before the close of business on Wednesday, July 15, 2020. Well, Temitope Oluwile, one of the research analysts with financial derivatives companies, here to speak to this and, of course, other economic issues. Temitope, thank you for joining us. Good morning. All right, no more Forex for maize importation, but I know that maize for some time have been, banned for about 4 or 5 years ago. So what's this? What does it mean? What difference does it make?
Okay, so yes, we saw that, the CBN suspended Forex access for, maize importers. And, we all know the obvious reasons, right? So, to promote maize production in Nigeria, to prevent cross-border smuggling, to prevent trader arbitrage. But, the one thing that came off as a surprise to us was, you on one hand, you adjust your exchange rate, right? Which would, it should make your imports more expensive and your exports cheaper, right? So you've already done that policy side. So it's now time for you to allow the market to do what they do, right? But you're still finding it so hard to, to just let go of those policy controls. So it brings us back to the argument of, economic populism, versus free market ideology, policy controls versus, allowing the market to do what they do, right? So that is a tricky
In other
part.
words, there is no need for the central bank to do this.
Because once your exports become cheap, your exports become more expensive, right? The alternative for you is to look inwards, is for backward integration, for you to promote, domestic production of, your imports, basically. So you've already done what you need to do. Now let the market do what the market does, right? So this basically speaking from both sides of the mouth, if you will, it's a bit confusing to the markets, yes.
Now, but how much is maize that it will make much impact?
When you look at our import bill, we have maize contributes, quite a bit of our import bill, but you have other things that, you can also focus on. There are other imports, that we have corn, maize is corn, right? You have you have wheat, you have wheat, you have sugar, you have the other, more pressing, if you will, import items that you can also be focusing on. But whatever the case may be, all these imports are supposed to become more expensive as you adjust your exchange rate, right? So it's now time for you to hands off and let the market do what they will.
So where is Nigeria in terms of maize production?
So, what we do know is that we import about 400,000 tons of maize. And so obviously you're trying to fill up a demand gap, right? If your production is not enough to meet your demand, what you're going to do is imports and to fill up that gap. So, and we have a lot of, maize-dependent commodities. You see that there are a lot of companies that use maize as an import. So what then happens to the earnings and, the profitability of these companies is what is on the mind of these companies.
All right. Now, what will this mean for, inflation number going forward?
Okay, yes. So, we see that the inflation for June is supposed to be released tomorrow, and over at FDC we're projecting 12.55%, and we see that is a continuous, is something that has been, inflation increasing is something that we've seen.
But you're also saying that the month-on-month inflation is going to come down.
Yes,
what are you seeing there?
Yes, because month on month, reflects what happened in May versus what happened in June, and what could make month on month decline is because we had that the interstate movement restrictions were lifted. So those logistics problems you were having of different checkpoints, making it more harder for you to bring produce from the farms to the markets, right? You see that has been taken care of by lifting the lockdown restrictions, and even as you open up airports, you're basically opening up your your borders, and for free flow is about the flow of the goods now. So we have that would reflect in our month-on-month inflation. But when you look at headline inflation, you still have inflation stoking factors like planting season, and more importantly, the exchange rate pass-through effect, especially as manufacturers begin to import commodities and see that, you know, what the exchange rate adjustment has meant on import costs.
Now, talking about this exchange rate adjustment, yes, we've seen some kind of unification in the official market and, of course, the INE window. Just wondering what's going on at the parallel market. I mean, that market is still going haywire.
Yes, you know, you would expect that, you know, the expectation was all rates would converge towards the IEFX window,
Absolutely.
right? So you would expect the parallel market to, you know, appreciate. But what we're seeing is that the CBN seems to be having a harder time relinquishing control of the official rate. Because one, if you look at it on the official website, it hasn't been adjusted. We've just seen the adjustment on other trading platforms, but the CBN itself has not been adjusted. And then you also, these speculative premiums, you also have that, you know, it went from 360 to 380, but IFX window is about 386. So in exchange rate terms, 380 is not approximately 386. You know, you need it to be what it is, right? So is there going to be another devaluation? Is there going to be, why didn't we just do it one time and,
No,
you
but
know,
for
let
now,
go
the
of it?
BDCs are not in business.
Yeah, so, you know, we have, because, again, Forex liquidity issues, you know, so you have all of those confusing factors, and it's part of the rationing that is making you, you know, look to maize and you know, import it, you know, to stop, you know, the access of Forex for these importers, you know, because you're rationing Forex. And more as we open up airports, as, you know, people go back to what would be the new normal, you know, what then happens, Forex demand pressure will build, what then happens to your Naira, you know, so those speculative premiums are going to reflect in the parallel markets as long as investors are there's still that ambiguity about this unified exchange rate, you know, adjustments.
All right, still talking about this maize, we know that the largest volumes of maize are produced in the northern region. We have Kaduna, Borno, Niger, and Taraba. And then some of these areas where you have unrest, you know, mostly. How then can Nigeria achieve itself sufficiency and perhaps improve on the value chain of maize production?
Yeah, you know, like, you know, as it becomes more expensive, you need to look inwards. So looking inwards is about the willingness and the ability, right? So if you want to look inwards, you have to address the problems that, you know, made you so dependent on imports, right? Because your production was not enough to meet the demand. So, you know, some of these problems like security challenges, infrastructure, you know, the storage, we have all of these things that affect the value chain right from the production to when it gets to the consumers and the, you know, industrials that use it. So once you address these problems, and that goes for every other commodity and not just maize, you know, addressing these structural problems is what policymakers need to be focused on right now. You've adjusted the price kind of, and now adjust the structural issues that made production and outputs difficult.
Now, on your burning economic issues, of course, one of it says mid-crop cocoa harvest ends early in Akwa Ibom. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so, you know, what we see is that, you know, when you take away the southwestern states that are known for cocoa production, Akwa Ibom also ranks kind of top in, you know, cocoa production in Nigeria. And what the reports we read was that, you know, that in Akwa Ibom, we're seeing that the harvest has had to be stopped abruptly, right? And we see that Akwa Ibom this year, the government is trying to improve the output of that particular state, you know, improving seedlings to the farmers, you know, all these incentive, right, to increase production. But we see that, you know, what you can't control, right, is, you know, weather conditions and, you know, things that are out of your control have suddenly affected the harvest in that state. But we still expect, you know, at least something close to what we were getting before for the harvest of Nigeria as a total, because of the incentives these state governments are starting to put and the attention they are putting to cocoa output in Nigeria.
All right, let's look at the domestic commodities price movement. What factors will drive prices going forward?
Okay, so going forward, you know, first of all, the fact that, you know, the aggregate demand, because we have inflation stoking factors, and these factors, one would expect it to lead to an increase in inflation to like 15%, or we're still getting that muted inflationary impact because aggregates, disposable incomes have fallen across board. Job losses, you know, have affected the demand from consumers. So we expect that would keep inflation below what it can actually be given these other factors. And then planting season, we see that is already affecting some commodity prices. And then we see that, you know, adverse rain condition is also affecting, we hear that is also affecting farmers from going to the market from going to the farm, for some of these produce. So those supply constraints would keep inflation elevated, but not as elevated as it can be given the aggregate demand problems.
All right. Thank you, Temitope, for your time. Temitope Olumide is one of the research analysts with Financial Derivatives Company.